Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to Victoria 3. I'm Lord Forwind, and here we've got another 10 tips for beginning starting out players in Victoria 3. Hopefully you enjoy this. I'll chapter them below so you can simply click on them, jump to whichever ones you'd like. If you do enjoy them, like, subscribe, do all that great stuff. Check out the other guides and tip videos I'm doing for this game as well. Okay, let's jump into this. Now, this is a tip that some of you may know and some of you may not know. First one is when you're going to build something, you have a build pool, obviously. And so if we were to queue up, say, a tooling workshop here on a building, it would slowly start building and you can see, obviously, the construction progress. Well, you might go, oh, that's taking a long time. Well, it is. We can, in fact, fix that if we want to. Now, this is where the tip kind of gets a little confusing, so bear with me for a moment. You can build additional construction sectors in your land, and yes, this can be very powerful. If you're a large nation and you want to develop even faster, or if you're a poor nation with tons of money, South Africa, once it exploits all its gold mines, you can build another construction sector. What I don't want you to do is, if you're a small nation and you're not super rich, is to build multiple of these. It's super tempting early on to throw down a construction building and go, I'm just going to pump out those buildings. Look at the cost here of the predicted earnings per week. This is a lot of money. Now, partial this is due to wages as well as fabric and factory. So if you got a lot of wood and fabric, it's not as big of an issue. But be aware, having two of these can easily sink an economy early game. So don't build too many of them. Take what the game is giving you, which is a very slow building rate early on. Use that to start your economy and then build more construction buildings. There's a reason construction is so slow at the beginning. You've got to industrialize your nation. If you're a small one, South Africa, most of the non-European nations, you're going to suffer on the construction front for some time. It's fine. There are techs that solve it. Don't make the mistake of throwing down multiple construction buildings because it will sink you. Not only the cost of this, but also the building supplies cost can skyrocket and just absolutely destroy you. So the tip is build construction buildings at some point. Don't build them early on if you can't afford them. And make sure you realize how expensive they are. They're probably the single most expensive building you can try and build at the start of the game for most nations. Tip 2. Check your import and exports pretty constantly. The game is very nice in telling you if you've got a unhealthy economy and stuff, but it also tells you if you have unproductive trade routes. It also tells you up here what are goods that you could import, making money on, or export to make money. So at the start of the game here, South Africa in particular, its economy kind of sucks. We could take it and we could sell dye. Now we've got a decent amount of dye. It will take convoys, but it will make us money. You're going to want to keep an eye on this because unfortunately, and it's hopefully something they fix, is that there's no easy way to see all your exact trade routes. So you kind of have to keep an eye on them and it will tell you if they're productive. This will change over time. It's not like Imperator Rome or something where once you import it, this is the amount of money you're making off of it until the route breaks. Nope. Victoria 3, it fluctuates. It also tells you everyone else in your market, which is confusing. Suffice to say, if it gets horribly unproductive or you're not getting stuff, it will send you an alert. Make sure you keep an eye on that. The worst thing is to start selling stuff when you're not making money, when you could be making more money selling it elsewhere, or buying something at an outrageous rate. The hard part is to keep an eye on buying stuff. If it gets super expensive, it can tank your economy quickly. This is an economy game almost more than it is a war or map painting game at all. Do your work. Keep an eye on your economy. Check import and export. You can even stick it up here on the market. It's nice. Click to it nice and quickly. Keep an eye on the profits. If something is making a lot is really expensive, might be a good idea to build groceries, or in this case, well, transportation's a bit of an odd one. But people want hardwood. Change your lumber camps or whatever to making hardwood. It'll make you more money than producing normal wood is. Just keep an eye on it. Check it periodically. I'd say, if depending on the speed you're playing, you should check it every 2-3 minutes, if not more often. It's kind of the focus of the game, let's be honest. At this point, at least. Okay, let's talk about authority. And this is something I disagree to a fairly good degree with what the tutorial teaches people. They teach you got this nice pool up here of authority, and you can use it to pass various state edicts and get benefits from. It's really not a solution to any problem, barring two, which we'll talk about. So if we were to take a degree, you'll see all these different ones, and some of these look great. Yeah, we're going to get more throughput on my industry, and yes, we can look at what throughput means. It's effectively turning the goods into outputs. Usually means more money. On the other hand, if the good they're importing costs a lot of money, will cost you more money, not necessarily giving you as much money on the export. So keep an eye on that. These are more, you should use them more as a reactive thing to solve a problem temporarily or to get a temporary economic boost. Don't rely on these to drive your country to great levels of profit. There's really only 2-3 of them that you're ever going to want to just leave on. Most of the others, first off, you should almost allocate all your authority, barring like 70 or 80 or so of it, but you don't want to have it just all applied randomly. You want to keep an eye on it, save it for emergencies. Yes, you can turn it off, but just remember it. So for an example here, we're in Cape Colony here, South Africa. We've got a problem here. Northern Cape has poor infrastructure, which is obviously causing trouble. So a good way to solve that would be to take it and throw down road maintenance on this. So now this is a 4 rather than a 5. Obviously, it's not a world's greatest example. But what this does is it solves the problem long enough for me to, in another circumstance, build a railroad or something to get the infrastructure going again. Now, if we are having problems with qualifications and educations, we can throw this down here to get population into our factories from their farms and stuff. We can do emergency relief here. This increases welfare. Why you would do this? This tends to stop radicals from getting even stronger, because usually it's your poorest population that tends to get most radicalized. Kind of consistent through history. Violent suppression. If you're having tons of turmoil, you can turn it out. Be aware that it increases mortality, so your population will decline. Don't leave this one on. 110%. Do not leave this on for long. Now, road maintenance is one you might throw around there. The construction efficiency is great. You should throw it down early on in the initial provinces you're developing. The rest of these over here, these are all promoting your industry. If you've got an industry that's just totally pumping out resources, your entire economy is based around it, throw this down. Otherwise, save this for if you start to have money problems, and you can always boost it again. Be aware it could make it worse. Now, the other ones, which I've avoided talking about till now, have their own effects, and some of these you'll want to leave on. The first one here, enlistment efforts. You should use this when you go to war, to get your conscripts and your troops trained and on the field faster, especially if you're not particularly prepared for the war. This will help a lot, not something you necessarily want to leave on all the time. This next one, the greener grass, increases migration attraction. Now, it doesn't increase necessarily the amount you're going to get, but it increases how interested people are in migrating to the area. So if we were to, let's look here at, come on game. If we were to look here, there is no migration, but there is a high attraction here because it's sparsely populated. If we were to throw down a grass is greener campaign here, the attractiveness would go up. Obviously, right up there, 50% up. This can be very powerful, especially if you've got an area you've recently increased standard of living in, you're trying to draw immigrants to, or you get an event. Cape Town, South Africa, gets quite a few of events associated with their gold mines. Hint, hint. It can help you a lot in getting population to your sparse areas. It's really good. The downside is it only works if your attraction is positive. If it's below everything else, it's not going to help you that much. Promote national values is probably the one that I would say you're going to throw down and leave down. If you want to try and create an ethno-religious state where you've just got one ethnicity and one religion, this is what you're going to use. You're going to take this and you're going to go and look at a province like this and say, we've got animists who we don't tolerate because we're Protestant in this case. And we've got all these other ones. English is not a huge culture here. These guys in particular, well, they're not really tolerated in our lands. They're discriminated against. Well, if you throw down promote national values and you let the game tick on over like 30, 40, 50 years, this is a long-term investment one. That's why I said it might be one that you throw down and leave down. This will convert the religion and then usually slowly convert the culture. The reality is the religion's going to go faster than the culture in almost every case. And you will slowly be able to build up a population of English Protestants out of the South African, however you say that, population and animist. It's not a huge issue if you're in the middle of your culture area or you're not taking over land that is of a different culture group. Learn the difference between primary cultures and non-accepted cultures, because sometimes your country will accept multiple cultures. Sometimes it will only accept one. You want to try and convert the discriminated ones, and that, of course, is affected by your law, citizenship law, segregation. Multiculturalism tends to get rid of it all. Ethno-state makes it worse. Of course, as you lower this, you get less authority, meaning you can convert less people. It's kind of an odd mix here. I would have separated it out a bit more, but the game creators lumped it all together under authority. Just use most of them as emergency stuff to solve a infrastructure problem, revolt problem, put more throughput through if you need more money or output, or you need to conscript your army. Other than that, don't leave these sitting around. They can warp your economy, and so then if for some reason you have to take it off, you could be causing larger ripple effects down the line. If you know where you're putting the authority and you know the game use them, otherwise be very tentative just tossing them out there. You've got a finite pool. Don't go negative. It causes problems. You're going to want a decent chunk for when you change things. Okay, tip 4. So this is a good one here for South Africa, Cape Colony. You'll notice here that they start the game losing money. The reason is, if you look at it, military wages are huge, as well as the goods for military buildings. Countries in this game start with a set amount of barracks and naval ports, and you can build more, being aware, of course, that the cost can get out of control, as we see in the case of South Africa here. South Africa, Cape Colony, isn't in any particular need to have a huge navy, or the reality is they don't even need that big of an army unless you're going to go on a conquering spree against your neighbors. So if you want to save your economy, as these guys, or another nation, which might have a bloated military, check initially to see if you're losing money, check if it's the military. If it is, just go through and get rid of these. Just look at that. We've saved huge amount of money already. If we were to lower this, we'd lose more. Now, the trick here is not to get rid of all your military if you're planning on fighting a war soon, or you're being under threat, or you don't have access to good amounts of population for conscription. I'm not going to go into the whole military thing about why regulars are really good compared to, say, conscripts. There's a whole thing behind it. Suffice to say, they're pretty decent. Either way, one way causes more trouble than the other. But getting rid of the military buildings, unless you're going to war or under threat, can solve a lot of your economy problems, and it will send those population to work elsewhere to help with your other buildings. But the big bonus is it cuts down on your wages, which, let's be honest, early on, that was a lot of money for a minor nation to be spending on an army we really didn't need at this point of the game. Other nations have bloated militaries out there that you may want to cut down, at least temporarily. Might as well take the money when you're not going to fight and spend it on buildings. You can always rebuild the military buildings later. They fill up rather quickly. The next tip here, tip 5, use your diplomacy influence. This is something I see several people making mistakes, and I know from other games it's going to be a huge problem. This is a finite pool, just like these other ones. Unlike money, if you're not using it, it really doesn't do anything for you. Yes, it helps lower your infamy decay, and if you're a warmonger, you're going to want to have a large pool of this. But for your average little nation like Cape Colony, this number here is entirely wasted. So what you want to do is you want to go into your diplomacy, or better off down here. You find a nation that you want to do diplomacy with, and you start interacting with them. The reality is most of what you're going to do is probably improve relations. If you're a colony, improve it with your motherland. Why not? Outside of that, you're going to have trouble unless you've got a strategic interest in the area. So if we were to declare an interest up there and say France, now if we go back here, we can now, oh, well, it hasn't actually, it takes time for the influence to go through. Sorry about that. I forgot that. It takes time for this to, oh, maybe I should have done that up there. That might have been more useful, actually. You want to keep the diplomacy going with nations around the world that you can interact with. It's not useful if you're not using it, other than to lower your infamy, but unless you're warmongering all the time, you're not going to have much of it. So find people around you, use it on them. The influence does a lot. You can do a vast variety of actions. The reality is, improve relations or sabotage, damage relations are what you're going to be using a lot. So just make sure you use the diplomacy, use it well. Save a pool for if you have to make any deals with people, because you do need some of that when you ask for decisions. Outside of that, cause havoc with relations, improve relations, ruin relations, join custom unions, rival people, violate sovereignty if you potentially want to start a war type stuff, or make things worse. Be aware that some of the actions are locked behind other stuff, but the reality is you should be spending most, if not all, of your influence improving relations, especially with nations you're not going to go to war with, because if you start a diplomatic play in an area, major nations may join the other side if they dislike you. But if they like you, you can sway them to your side, or they might be persuaded to be neutral. Why not use it? You've got it. It's a mana pool. It's finite. It doesn't build up over time. Spend it while you got it. Okay. Next tip has to do with importing export again, but it is slightly different. We're going to talk about the need to build ports everywhere early on. Until you can get improved tech, you're going to have a very limited number of convoys, and it is extraordinarily easy to run out of them, especially if you're trying to make money as a trading nation. So, whoops, that was a bad trade route to do, actually. See right here, now we've gone negative, which now causes trouble. It's going to tell us we have an unproductive trade route. First off, we can turn that off. But if you try and run a lot of these trade routes when you have low convoys, they won't level up. They won't make you much money. Let's see, when is it going to tell us that we've got a problem? There we go. Trade routes need convoys. Basically, it's saying, guess what? You don't have enough ships to supply all the trade routes you have. The way to get more, build ports or change the production or the production methods at your ports. Most people are going to start with cargo ports, but even still, you don't gain a lot from them. You get way more once you get to modern and industrials. One of the things you can do to help your economy the most is to throw down ports where you can. Each port will give you 200 convoys. Early on, if you're trading a lot, which you should, you're going to run out of them. It's almost never a bad idea to throw down some ports. Be aware, though, ports do have a maintenance amount, so if you're not trading, don't follow this tip. But you're going to want some. They give you market access. They allow you to pull off more trade routes, make more money. It's a really good thing to build ports wherever you can, especially if you're a small nation. If you're someone like Cape Colony, you run out of them really early on, even though you have resources. If, for goodness sakes, you're playing Belgium, you only have access to one port area, meaning unless you can conquer your neighbors, you have a finite amount of convoys for a long time. Might as well build that up and get the trade money coming in when you can. If you're a larger nation like England, less of a necessity, but it still gives you benefits, more money, more trade, more infrastructure. The infrastructure in particular is pretty handy in states. So throw down your ports. Don't forget they exist. Common mistake in a lot of games is neglecting your infrastructure. This is one of those. Okay, this next tip, tip 7, is quick, it's easy, it's simple. Probably a good portion of you learned this from the tutorial, but for those of you who didn't, I'll cover it again. If you hover over this tooltip here, you will see Alt-click to queue at the top of the construction queue. This is very useful. Right now we've got logging camps here. If I don't want to go in when I add something else, say another logging camp, if I don't want to go in and manually go up, I just hit Alt, I move it up. I hit Alt, I move it down. Or you just cancel it. There's no Alt there. Use Alt, saves you a lot of time and harassment when you're making dumb moves. You can, if you've got a high priority building like a military or a port or a railroad or something that's going to cause a bottleneck, hit Alt, throw it up the top. Don't have to worry about going in and sorting it or anything. It allows you to maintain a much longer queue of buildings, especially if you're not using the auto build function, which I will mention again. Click on logging camp or something. There's an automatically expand button. Not particularly good early on, comes into its own more towards the late game or when you're distracted. Let's talk about consumer taxes. This is something that, or consumption taxes, I should say. This is something that people misunderstand. The tutorial and other videos have not done a great job of explaining it, so we'll cover it again. It's an additional tax they have to pay. It increases the market price. You get the money, which is great. Certain buildings are exempt from paying them, but POPs do. Now, oh, cool. Guide me. What this means is anyone who wants to buy this has to pay extra money on this good. So if you've got a poor population, putting a consumption tax on your grain might not be the best idea because it means it will make them poorer, lower their quality of living, etc., etc. On the other hand, can give you a needed boost of money in the short run. Takes authority though, so just be aware of that. It's probably not a great idea to throw hundreds of these down there. The one I found that was particularly useful to do is services. Because services aren't traded on the market, the people in your country have to get services from your population. So it can't skyrocket out of control prices left and right. It's kind of fixed. Downside is everything uses services to some degree. Don't use this as, oh, this is just, I'm going to run my entire economy off of them. It will cause problems for you in the long run. Your pops will get poorer, they'll get more radical, they'll get angry, etc. Tend to use it to cover shortfalls or maybe one or two to prop up your economy early on. Yes, throwing it on food can be quite useful. Grain, services. If you're China, opium is a particular one that people tend to like. Kind of cool. Later on, though, you're going to want to focus these on populations that can afford it. So like super rich populations or populations where their standard of living is above what they expect due to various things, throw a consumption tax on them. So, hey, we got some nice rich people here who are using luxury furniture. Let's tax them. Why not? It's not going to ruin their quality of life or their standard of living. They're not going to get too much more angry, and you'll make some more money from it. It can be very useful for boosting your revenue in the long run. Just be aware of who you stick it on. It's very tempting to do it on the largest number, but that can cause problems for you in the long run. Everything's interconnected, and this is one of them. It's a very cool little function. Be aware, though, it can cause you a lot of trouble if you're not careful. Okay, I forget what number we're on, but let's talk about the next one. Political groups. One of the best tips I can give you of dealing with a political group is find a group that follows the principles that you're going to deal with and go check them out, whichever type of country you want to build, look at them. You're going to want to find one early on and promote bolster rather, or suppress them. If they're kind of cause trouble for your end goal, like you're going to be anti-religion and you've got a religious group, you're going to want to suppress them. Otherwise, pick a political group that you want. By and large, bolster them so you get the nice little impact here on interest group attraction. It will lead the group to get larger, get more political power, then they'll tend to help you support your agenda, or rather their agenda that you're supporting to get to your end goal. Pick it early, tend to stick with it for a long time. Be aware it does cost authority. In my opinion, one of the best ones to do is the intelligentsia here, or however you say it. Some of their bonuses here, especially the propagandists for small nations with the migration, as well as the technology cost, can be really handy. This is, however, of course, you have to be more liberal and Republican. If you want to be conservative and less supportive of that, landowners probably going to be your best ones. They're paternalistic. They like noble stuff. Pick one, stick with it for a while. Kind of have an idea at the beginning of a game where you're going. If you neglect this, your interest groups will change over time in ways that you can't really shape. They kind of cover this a bit in the tutorial, but one of the best tips I can give is pick the one you're going to end up with, or at least you want to be strong. Bolster them, just leave it there the whole game. They'll tend to be your largest or one of your most influential groups, and you won't have any real surprises. This is not going to be a full building tutorial here, but we're going to talk for the last one about what to build if you have no idea what else to build. The reality is your building resources is almost never bad. The real problem with your economy can pop up when you start building advanced buildings. Like if we built an arms industry here, we don't have the goods or the economy to support building those to sell them. Building something simple as logging camps to get wood almost never goes out of style in this game, nor does stuff like grain or fish or tea or coffee, because guess what? The British are tea drinkers and they tend to dominate. These are always good things. If you don't know what else to build, building resource buildings is almost never a bad decision. Just keep an eye on the amount of peasants you have, because that's how much population you have spare to work on one of those farms without having to necessarily get educated. So if you've got no peasants, don't build more buildings. Otherwise, these are usually good things to spend your money on. The reality is they rarely go broke unless you're using like base level farming and someone else is using modern industrial message and just totally sinks your economy and bloats the market with those resources. Otherwise, usually a safe thing to do, build resources when in doubt. You want to try and build the resources that don't necessarily require any goods if you don't know what else to do. Be aware, of course, as you change your production methods, they will require more various things. So like all of a sudden now, when we were to go to build something, the wheat farm here might not be the best thing to build here. Or if we do build it here, we might want to change the production method unless we can support the tool upkeep. If you've got no economy, base level, don't upgrade your production methods, you'll be fine building resource buildings. Later on, you'll be fine building them anyway. You're going to need a lot more resources than you expect. Remember, it's kind of like a pyramid, the economy. You need a wide base to support a very narrow top. If you're going to build cannon, there's a lot of steps to getting to the point of making the stuff, as well as getting the ammunition and small arms to support a military. You can't just start building those immediately unless you're able to buy the goods from the market, and you're usually going to go broke if you do that. So resources, never a bad thing to build. I'd say 95% of the time, safe choice. Very safe choice. So hopefully that helps you guys with the economy. Also, gold, always a good thing. And that's it. Thank you guys all for watching. Hopefully this tip video helps you. Keep an eye out for any other guides, let's plays, or live streams I'm doing. If you enjoyed, definitely subscribe, leave a comment, tell me your best tips. I'd love to know. And see you guys all in another video. Bye for now.